Hello, Jen here with a layout for Tuesday's inspiration. That was the inspiration. It's going to pop up again right there for you from Mel for last week. And it's this warm and cozy Christmassy cookie, Christmas baking scene. And I think it's just really lovely. And I instantly thought from the image of the cookie cutters being used to cut out shapes in cookie dough, that it's exactly like stamping. So that is where I'm going with the inspiration for my layout. And I pulled out those photos that were in my travel album. I pulled out 2 of them last week. I don't know if you noticed that. Hop back if you want to see what I did last week with the inspiration. That was this super fun travel image. I did a flip through of my travel albums from 2017, and then I just decided I would pick the first pictures kind of that came up in the album that still needed to be scrapped. And so I pulled out 2 because I always, when I organize albums like that, I take all of my photos, I send them to the printers, I'll edit them to be different sizes, and then send them to the printers, cut them all out and organize them, and then I put them into their pockets. So at any point, if I need to put my albums away or something comes up and I don't revisit them, I don't have to worry that I've kind of lost the organization and where I want photos to go and all of that, because all of the pages are done. Now, sometimes it changes, you put something away for a year and you come back and you have a new product that just really inspires you to change something up. That's totally fine. But for the most part, I can just kind of work on those albums as I want to, rather than having to try to finish them all or worry about, not remembering where I was going with a certain theme or whatever it might be. And I do the same thing with my annual albums. When I do 12 by 12 project lifestyle albums, I do the same thing. So that way, if I at least have all the pictures and they're all into pockets and I have sort of a general idea of how I want it organized, I'm not too worried if I then put them away for a little bit of time and don't get back to them. So I pulled out 2 photos. I did one last week in that same flip through video, and then the other one is for this week. So this is a picture of us at the New Glasgow Lobster Supper in PEI. And so I went into my stash that I actually keep as a kit, a travel kit for this album, specifically papers that I knew would match Canada, because it was a road trip across Canada, and the kind of iconic images that I thought I would need for that. So that is where the lobster paper came from. I can't honestly tell you who the manufacturer is or how I came to acquire it, because it's been almost 10 years. But the red paper is Simple Stories, and the stamps are close to my heart. And that I can definitely tell you. The stamps, I think one of them is called like Travel Canada, and then the little square, that is from their series that they did where they released a different stamp for each province. And I'm sure they did it for every state as well. I don't know if they did it for anywhere else in the world, but I have all of the Canadian provinces and the 3 territories. I think those are the only 2. Oh, and then I did use, I think, another stamp that is more just of a general kind of road trip travel stamp, also from close to my heart. So I grabbed those 4 stamps out. I want to conserve some of that lobster paper because we've done this road trip many times, and I know I have other photos one almost identical to this actually, and so I might want to use it again in other albums. So I didn't use that whole lobster page. I made sure to just cut it out a little bit so I have some to save. And then I am stamping all over, kind of like you would if you were cutting out cookies from a sheet of dough. I stamped all over the red background paper, and that kind of is where the inspiration is. So I set the 3 stamps together and kind of use that to fill in most of the space. And then because I knew that, there was going to be little gaps and stuff, I found a little maple leaf to fill in some of those gaps. And I didn't want it to be perfect. I didn't want everything to be lined up in rows, and I didn't want it to look super, super clean and perfect, because that's not how I would cut out cookies. I would cut out cookies and, try to nestle all the different shapes together to maximize the amount of actual cookies I can get and shapes that I can get from my first roll of the dough. So I wanted the stamps to kind of feel like that, like they'd been all moved around and nestled together and just tucked in to each other. So very easy stamping. I learned from my mistakes. I know the stamping rules, but I'm not always following the stamping rules, especially on this table. And it does always make me regret my decision, because this table is not perfectly flat. It has a bit of a bend to it. It's just one of those IKEA tables that can easily come apart. And so it's not perfectly flat. And so I did learn from the last few times that I've stamped on this table that it needs some help, or it's not going to end up with, stamping that comes out very nice and clean. So I just used the little foam that is in the package with the stamps, and it actually worked out wonderfully. But you could use a mouse pad, or even just like a magazine, just something that gives you a bit of give and bounce and levels your table, or levels your stamping space, especially on 12 by 12s. I don't have a stamping platform that would fit this space, so I'm not going to try to squish my paper into the stamping platform that I have. So just tucking something in there to help kind of give you a more even surface to work with, and a little give kind of compensates for any of that unevenness. And then I went into my kit again and pulled out some 49 and Market. This is, I think, is it called their Coastal Shore collection, or Shoreline, something like that. I have some chipboard, and I have some of that big ephemera that they put out with a lot of their collections. And it's all kind of, coastal and very Maritimes vibey. There's some, lighthouse themes to it and stuff like that too. I didn't really find any lobsters, which is interesting. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, and I guess I have a ton of lobsters in the background paper and in the stamping, so I didn't really need lobsters. But sometimes the occasional cute little lobster wouldn't be too bad to pop in there. But I went for just a couple of things that are more like on the shore. We're not actually on the ocean or anything like that. So we're on the shore. So I tried to find some of that kind of stuff. I stuck to a little bit of red, but mostly grays and blues, just to have a bit of contrast to all of the red and the white. And I've got some starfish, and I've got a compass, and a couple of anchors, and yeah, pretty basic. I didn't want to add a ton of extra embellishment because there's a lot going on with this stamping, and I'm also at a point where I have filled in these albums enough to know that they're probably going to spill into a third album because it's starting to get a little bit chunky. And every new layout that I add that has a bunch of dimension to it just adds to that chunkiness. 1 or 2 pages that have a lot of dimension in an album is fine, but it might not seem like it's a big deal. But when you start to have back to back to back layouts with lots of chipboard and lots of ephemera and different dimensions of ephemera and lots of layers and stuff, it does get chunky, and then you do end up putting a lot of pressure on the spines of the albums and stuff like that. So for the layouts that I have coming up that are left over, I'm really working on keeping them kind of simple, nice embellishment, but doesn't necessarily have to be overly complex or detailed, or, I don't have to do any of those fussy little layouts that they can be lots of fun to do, but I don't need every one of them to be like that. Sometimes I just need to have a few really fun, pretty things on a page and tell the story, and that's good enough for me. So I picked out those fun things that I liked. I kind of liked the seagulls. I thought they were kind of fun. You always see them around the lobster boats and stuff like that. So I thought that worked good, and I have sort of 3 little embellishment areas. I added that little envelope and the card because I thought it would be fun to maybe write down the menu that we had, because if you haven't been to a lobster dinner, the fun thing about going to one is just the crazy amount of food that you get. So the menu it's kind of important. It's an integral part of the process. And essentially, lobster dinners happen all throughout the East Coast. I think anyone that is a lobster fisherman, especially in smaller communities, at the end of the season, after they had pulled in all of their boats and all of their nets and they were ready to kind of hunker down for the season, you would sell as much lobster as you could, but you would kind of celebrate that the season is over, but also eat your share of the lobster and stuff as well. And so the whole community would come together and they would, I guess, essentially have like a potluck. But now it's something that they do in churches, or there are big halls in New Glasgow where we were. They have a big hall that is the Lobster Supper Hall. And so you pick your main course. It could be just lobster. It could be steak and lobster. It could be just a ham dinner if you want. Not a lot of options, but you pick what you want. And then when you go in, you can sit just with your family, but a lot of times you get placed at a table that might have another family sitting at it too, like a nice long table. And then the food starts, and they start with a starter. Oh, you get your bib. That's what I'm showing you there. But you get your starter, which we always pick the mussels, and it comes in like a giant Home Depot bucket of mussels, and you can get a couple buckets if you need to, but you get your bucket of mussels. I think there's a couple other options, but the mussels are what we always go for. Then you get your soup. Then you get your salads. It's usually like a potato salad and like a tossed salad and a Caesar salad, I think. And then you get your main. And then that always comes with veggies and potato. And then you get dessert. And the funny thing about desserts is, we asked what they recommended for us, and she was like, oh, well, one of everything is what you should have. So they definitely aren't shy. You can ask for seconds and thirds as much as you want. And if you want to try one of every dessert, which there are sometimes like 10 of them, you can do that too. So that is Lobster Supper, and I wanted to share that in my journaling. So that's what you see there. And that's it. That is my layout. I added a couple little sequins and some dots. And I am all. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please check on Hollie, Lynda, and Mel to see what's inspiring them today. And until next time, happy scrapping. Bye.
Button, my channel.